Hello and welcome to the Running on Carbs podcast. I am your host, Coach Val, and I would like to welcome you to episode number 63 of the podcast. Today, I am so excited to be recording this episode because my 4 months of effort and training has finally paid off and is done. Today, we are going to talk a race recap. I love a race review, and I hope you do as well. Uh, and today, we're going to talk about my big 50th birthday marathon that I ran just a couple of days ago in beautiful North Bend, Washington. If you have been following the show for very long, you know that I was turning 50 and I was looking for a marathon to do for celebrating my 50th birthday. And the Jack and Jill's Downhill Marathon in Washington was on my birthday. And so that made it the perfect race in my mind. And again, if you've been following the show very long, you know that not all that long ago, I was on my butt with a femoral neck stress fracture. And I was not running. And it took me 9 months to return to any type of high impact activity. And from return to day one, off crutches and, off crutches, not just walking anymore, the whole process took 9 solid months. And when I was finally able to start running and doing high impact activity again, it still took a lot of time. I had to start as if I was a brand new runner. So I started with the run, walk, run intervals, just like a brand new runner should do if they're going to build up safely. And my whole goal was to get back to the marathon. And so that journey took from July of 2023 when I stopped running. My last long run was in the middle of July 2023 due to pain, although I was not diagnosed with my stress fracture until September of that same year. That was when it actually occurred. And to running a full marathon on my 50th birthday, mind you, in July of 2025. So it has been a 2-year journey back to the marathon. And I am very excited to share my story of the final, I don't know, topper, cherry on top, if you will. I'm really bad with sayings if you don't know already. But I finally did it. So I knew all along that I would get back to the marathon and I would get back to running, and I wanted to do it safely, and I have accomplished that. And so today I'm going to share a race recap with you, not just about my story. I just wanted to share that with those who maybe did not know that that's where this is all coming from. Um, but to share about the race itself, in case you or you yourself want to run the race, or if you know someone who wants to run the race, then this should be an honest review of the race itself and the logistics and everything that you might expect if you were to sign up and run this maybe next year. So let's jump into this. First off, I want to remind you that in episode number 62, the episode just before this one, I actually spoke with Leanne Yarbo, who is the founder of the Jack and Jill Downhill Marathon in Washington. So that was the first of her series. However, she sold the race a couple of years ago, and so it's now run by and owned by Run Super Series. And I have to say that they did a fantastic job. The logistics, the organization, everything was very well organized, and it was just a well-run race from my perspective as a racer. So hats off to them. They did a great job. But if you want to know some of the nitty gritty and you want to hear about all of the news that came out of Boston Athletics Association recently about downhill marathons and using them to qualify for the Boston Marathon, we talked a lot about that in episode number 62. So I encourage you to go back and listen to that for some more in-depth background information on downhill racing. So today, I'm just really going to talk about the race itself, because we've already gone through all of the qualifications and everything in the last episode. So let's just jump in. I'm going to start with Sunday morning. So, first off, the race is on 2 days. So, it's on Saturday and Sunday. They do a half marathon and a marathon on Saturday, and then a half marathon and a marathon on Sunday. So there's plenty of opportunity to run the race. They don't always sell out, although some races will sell out. So the half marathon, I think, sold out on Saturday this year. Not sure about the marathon. I'm actually really surprised that the marathon on Sunday didn't sell out this year, given the news out of the Boston Athletics Association, because this is the last year. If they use the same course next year, there'll be a penalty associated with this course for their qualifying time. So I was a little surprised that more people didn't sign up last minute um, for the Sunday marathon and that it didn't sell out. But lucky for me because it left a little bit more room on the course for all of the runners. So Sunday morning, I stayed in Snoqualmie, which is about 40 minutes away from the start line. And so I had a 40-minute drive to the start line. So that meant that my morning started at 3 a.m. and start was at 6 a.m. So I had woke up about 3 hours before I actually had to start running at the start line. And honestly, I didn't have any trouble getting up at 3 a.m. I'm always excited. I got the race nerves on race day. So for me, it was no problem. But I always like to get up early and get a meal. So I always like to fuel and have my regular meal like I would on any long run day. That would include my beets and a bagel with almond butter and protein coffee. That's basically what I do before any long run or any race. So I had everything in my hotel room. Yes, I traveled with my toaster. I put my toaster in my checked bag and I brought my toaster with me. So I had my own toaster and my bagels that I got at Safeway the day before, and I also picked up some cold beets, already cooked from Safeway, from the grocery store that was right across the street from my hotel. And I brought my own special balsamic vinegar, again in my checked bag, and I just sealed it up really well. And so I had my cinnamon pear dark balsamic vinegar for my beets. And so I had my normal breakfast and I just prepped my own protein powder with my supplements in it that I take. And so I had everything ready to go, just like I would on any other day. And I think what I'll do is I'll probably do a separate podcast episode about prepping and traveling as a vegan endurance athlete, or a vegan endurance runner, so that you can kind of get some tips on how to travel, even if you're going to be traveling by plane. I normally travel by car, and I've done an episode on that before, but this was a new experience. I've never actually flown for a race before, so I wasn't really sure how all of this was going to come together. So I'll share that in a separate episode, to give you some tips on that. So anyway, I was out the door by 4:15 and did my 40-minute drive. Beautiful, beautiful, beautiful drive. Oh my God, the trees in this area of the country in Washington State, North Bend area, they're massive, massive trees and green, and it was just absolutely beautiful. The whole environment was beautiful. I loved being among the trees. There was only a little bit of traffic when I got off the freeway, and it was actually all race traffic, and that was because some of the race volunteers were directing traffic to an overflow parking lot at that point. So kind of slowed things down a little bit, but it really wasn't bad. And it was funny, they were directing us to the parking lot that I had already found from another YouTuber, who recommended this parking lot over the paid parking lot. And so I had already GPS, programmed in to go to that parking lot already. And so it was convenient. They were just sending us there now anyway. So I just followed the crowd and got a great parking spot in this big dirt lot, and no problem. Probably the easiest parking I've ever had for a race, as a matter of fact. And that actually has changed a little bit. I was talking to someone who ran this race a few years ago, maybe 4 or 5 years ago, something like that. Um, and and they were saying that, when they ran the race, you had to take a shuttle bus to the start line. So you parked at the finish, apparently, and then you shuttled to the start. In this case, that is I didn't know that, but there were no shuttles though from the finish to the start. So you parked at the start, and when you finished, then they had shuttles that would take you back to your car at the start, which I thought was really convenient. I really hate having to get somewhere super duper early just to get on a shuttle to go to the start line where you get to sit longer and wait some more. So I preferred this method if that actually has changed. There were no shuttles. You just go straight to the start line. So that was easy. And they gave you a drop bag when you pick up your bib. I picked my bib up on Friday when I got into town, and I'm really glad I did, because on Saturday I talked to someone else who was running the half marathon, and she picked up her bib on Saturday and said that the line was super long and kind of wrapped all the way around the building, and it was a little confusing. So she had a little different experience than I did. When I went on Friday, I walked right up, got my bib. I think I was done in like 10 minutes, if that. And that was because I kind of wandered around the store inside. But it's the bib pickup was at the only one running store in the little town, and they actually have a running store though in this town. So as you can see, running is a really big deal in the area. A lot of trail shoes, I noticed, lots of trail shoes. So anyway, I had prepared my post workout, my post run drink. So I had Tailwind in a thermos with ice, and I had a jacket in my drop bag in case I needed it, which, by the way, I did not. It was very hot at the end. And then a little snack in my drop bag. So that was about it. Um, and put my little tag on it and just dropped it off and went over and hit up the porta potties to one last time. And then I was did my stretches while I'm standing in line, and then that was it. And then they started calling out, "Hey, we're starting in 15 minutes. Make your way down this path to the start line, and make sure you're not on the path, because you'll get run over by all the runners who are going to be running back toward where we were leaving from the staging area." So anyway, I headed down there, and the whole process seemed very quick. There was actually a pacer that was doing the 6-hour marathon that I wanted to go and meet because I follow her on Instagram. And she was there at the race, and I didn't have an opportunity to go and introduce myself and meet her, which was a little kind of a bummer. But I was already lined up, and I didn't want to get out of the queue and everything. So anyway, I didn't have that opportunity because things did move very quickly. So kind of good and bad. I had worn a throwaway jacket. I know it's a terrible name. I have to come up with another name for it. But basically, it's a jacket that I purchased at Goodwill for, I don't know, $7 or $10 something. And I had it over my running vest. So I get it in a little bigger size so that it fits over everything and I can zip it up if I need to. And so I had my throwaway jacket on, and I was comfortable. So as far as like temperatures were concerned, it was not bad. I later looked at my Coros watch and I looked at the temperature. It said it was 47, but I had shorts on and just this sweatshirt, zip up sweatshirt jacket, and I was not cold at all. It's probably the race nerves, and, I did say I'm 50, right? So, those hot flashes come with it now. Um, so it could have been a number of things, but I was comfortable. Um, anyway, the lines of the porta potty, everything was, short. It wasn't overwhelming. I guess maybe I'm so used to these big, big races like the rock and roll marathon where you got to line up in the queue and it takes a half an hour to get to through the porta potty line to the porta potty. And this was just a very different experience when it comes to number of people and crowds. So the crowds were so minimal. I really enjoyed that a part of it. And the race started right on time. So right at 6 a.m., they did wave uh, groups. So it was done by pacing groups. So if you were one of the faster runners, you took off first. And I was as usual, I was kind of middle of the pack. So I was in I think it was right behind the 4 hour, 30-minute pace group when I started at the start line. Hmm. And they quickly went out way faster than me. So I was, the thing about the terrain, and I'll talk a little bit more about it, but the terrain is dirt. I'm much more accustomed to running on roads and maybe some very, very hard packed gravel. And this was neither of those. So the terrain was kind of rough in a lot of ways, in a lot of places. So I was really kind of taking my time as far as like getting in my groove. Plus, I always run my first couple miles a lot slower just to warm up. And since things were so rushed, I didn't get my normal activation exercises. I didn't get my normal stretches. I did the best I could with the space I had as far as like standing in the corral and then standing in line, at the porta potty. But it wasn't my normal routine. So that was a little off. And I was a little concerned going into such a long race, 26.2 miles, and not having my normal full warm up and activation exercises. I did bring a black loop band that I stood by my car when I parked and did some things like some standing fire hydrants. And I did um, I couldn't really do monster walks. I don't know. Maybe I just felt kind of silly, so I didn't do my monster walks. But I did stand and do some standing looped side kickouts. So like for the glute med, basically. Um, and I also did some warm up for my hip flexors, where you just put the loop around your feet, stand on it, and lift one knee. And so I did some of those to warm up the hip flexors as well. So I didn't really get a lot of glute activation in that. So anyway, like I said, I was a little nervous given that I really was going to be running a long distance and I didn't have my full, activation, warm up exercises. So I hoped for the best. And it worked out. I did not get injured, no pain in that sense. So it was okay. But I still took those first couple miles really easy just to make sure I was really warmed up because I didn't have a walk to warm up like I also would normally do. There really wasn't enough room to walk that much. So it worked out walking from the car to the start line. 5 minutes, maybe. I mean, it's not really much of a warm-up walk, but apparently it all worked out fine. So, first couple miles, the big thing about this race, the sort of claim to fame, is that you run through an old train tunnel. So, the whole course is an old train track, and they've removed the tracks from the course and so that's why the terrain is a bit uneven, a bit slanted and sloped in places, like it has a camber to both sides. Um, And so the first thing you do is about half mile in, you go into the tunnel and you have to have a headlamp. And so that's part of the requirement of the course. You got to have your own headlamp. And for safety reasons, you really want your own headlamp because what I found is that when I got into the tunnel, well, first of all, my headlamp was wonky. So I knew I should have just changed the batteries. But I had tested it when I was still home and it didn't come on. And so I opened it up and I kind of spun the batteries and then I closed it back up and it came on. So I know, okay, I guess it's just kind of a little setting. I should have changed the batteries. I don't know what I was thinking. I didn't. I get to the race, and that morning before I went to the race, I checked it. It worked. I have it on my head. I go into the tunnel. I turn it on. It doesn't turn on. So I'm running along, like messing with this headlamp that's, on the front of my visor. And I finally got it to come on. Oh, thank God. So headlamp came on and I clicked it twice. I don't think it was the brightest setting, but I was afraid to mess with it anymore because it was on and I didn't want it to turn off. So I just left it. And every once in a while, I would put my hand up, in front of my face, in front of my head to make sure it was still on. And it lasted. So it was good. So, anyway, into the tunnel, I had my sweatshirt on still, so I ran in my throwaway jacket, sweatshirt, all the way through the tunnel, and it was a little bit colder in there. I was kinda glad to have it, but I did kinda think, I don't know that I really needed the jacket. I could have done without it, but it didn't slow me down, and I was actually kinda comfortable, so it worked for me. I The terrain in the tunnel is rough. There was a woman, God, I think we weren't even halfway through the tunnel, and she must have, anyway, she must have twisted her ankle or done something, but she was already off to the side, sort of leaning against the wall. There was another runner there, helping her, so she must have stepped wrong. The the dirt in there, it's dark. You can't see even with your headlamp. Um, Unless you're like have your head down, really pointed at the ground, you're not always seeing exactly where you're stepping. And there's some wet spots. I heard someone behind me complain. She's like, I just stepped in a puddle. My shoe's all wet. Thankfully, I avoided all the puddles. I could kind of see them shiny on the ground, so I could see where they were. So I didn't hit any puddles. Um, I didn't hit any pockets where my ankle turned or anything, but I could see them as I was running, like up ahead of me. So, being a longtime hiker, I'm pretty accustomed to doing like the rainbow, rainbow view with your eyeballs, about 3 feet ahead, and so I was checking the terrain as I was running to make sure that I was avoiding any of these little divots that were there, and I stayed in the middle of the tunnel, which is where Leanne told me to run. She said, "Stay in the middle. It's the easiest on your body, and it's going to be the least pockety as far as terrain and the least rocks." So I tried to stay as close to the middle as possible. It was kind of the middle left, and that worked really well. And so I was able to avoid like the water and everything. It is very dark and it's wet. Um, and someone had said, well, if your headlamp doesn't work, you can just rely on all the runners around you with their headlamps. That could have worked if I was near other runners. But what I found along the way, not only in the tunnel, but also out on the course, is I found myself running alone quite often. So I was, there'd be runners way up ahead of me and there'd be runners way behind me. But I found that I was kind of on my own a lot of times during the race, which was beautiful and peaceful and nice. Um, but wouldn't have been very helpful if I didn't have my own headlamp. So if you're going to do the race, definitely make sure you have a working headlamp on you. Um, the the tunnel is very long. It's 2.5 miles, and I mean, 2.5 miles can go by really quick for some speedier runners. And for me, it just felt really long. So I was kind of getting to the point where I really wanted to be out of the tunnel um, by about probably the 2 mile mark, right around there. So I still had about a half a mile to go. I was really grateful when I started seeing the end of the tunnel get bigger, bigger, bigger. You can see the end of the tunnel when you enter the tunnel at the very beginning. You can see the little light at the very end because it's just straight shot through. So it's kind of interesting. And I'm glad I did it. I mean, I'm glad I experienced that. But that was not my favorite part of the race. My favorite part of the race is more about running through the trees and on the beautiful paths. That was my favorite part. The tunnel was novel, but not necessarily my favorite part because I really had to stay so focused. I didn't even turn my music on during the tunnel. I had my headphones on, but I just didn't even turn on any music because I wanted to hear what was going on around me, like 100%. And I wanted to stay extremely focused on my footing. So I would definitely recommend having that awareness if you're going to do the race too. And by the way, the tunnel's so big and it's, stone. So there's no GPS in the tunnel. And so I knew that from the very start, I was going to have to rely on the flags on the course to know my actual mile markers. Um, my GPS watch, I don't know how it does it, but it got off track at first, but then somehow it caught up with me. And my distance ended up being very close to the actual course distance. So I don't know how it does that. I also found that sometimes all along the course, not just in the tunnel, but all along the course, it would lose GPS or something. And I'd look down to check my pace and it would be completely off. I'd be running and it would say 15-minute mile. Like, no, no, I'm not walking. I'm running. And I knew it was wrong. So, some of these indicators that we use very often and rely on are not going to be available on this course. So, a lot of time, I just had to sort of go with it, wing it, and trust my training, which I always preach, trust your training. So, I listened to myself and I said, okay, I'm just going to follow the flags. So, I'll know where I am at the mile markers. Uh, the hard part about that is sometimes if you are on a different type of race course where you do have GPS, you can kind of look at your watch and have an idea, okay, I'm a quarter mile away from the next mile marker or, something. So you kind of gauge how far the next mile marker is. I didn't have any of that. I just relied on the actual mile markers. So when I would see one, I would get really excited because then I knew I had made it another mile. Um, and my pace was good. I when I got my results back at the very end of the race, most of my miles were pretty consistent. So I was pretty excited about that outcome. So I'd say that was my experience in the first, I don't know, up to maybe 10-ish miles, 9+ miles. Things were pretty smooth that whole time. One thing I did have to change was that I did not want to take a gel while I was in the tunnel because I didn't want to be distracted. Like I was saying, it was too dark. And so I didn't, I normally would take a gel every 2 miles. And so I took one before I started and then I would have taken one at 2 miles, but because I was still in the tunnel, I didn't, and so I took my first gel at mile 3. So instead of doing every even mile, I just switched and did every odd mile, for a gel, during the whole race. So I did, 3 and then 5, etcetera. So that was a quick and easy adjustment that I just made right on the fly, during the race. So 10 miles is where it starts to get interesting. So at about 10 miles, I was not feeling very good. My stomach was not feeling good. And I'm not going to go into any kind of details at all, but just know that I have never had to stop on any type of race course for a restroom break. And I decided that at the 10-mile mark, there was a porta potty coming up, and I'm like, I can just push through and be very uncomfortable, or I could just stop. And, I'm not going for a BQ. I'm here to run my race and I'm running it. So why not be comfortable? So I'm like, okay, I'm just going to stop. And so I stopped off at the porta potty, jumped out, as fast as I could, and then just kept going. And I was so glad that I did. I felt a lot better. I was just much more comfortable and able to just not focus on, my head in my head going, "Oh, I'm uncomfortable. I don't like this. This is uncomfortable." Then I just felt good again. So I was really glad that I decided to just stop and make sure I enjoyed my race. So again, lesson for you. If you are running a race and you're uncomfortable, stop. It doesn't really take that much time off of your time, and it's worth it because if you're slowing down because you're otherwise uncomfortable, then it's not gonna bode well, and you might find that you get down, the trail a mile or 2, and there isn't anywhere to stop. And then now, you're in a worse spot. So just stop if you need to. There's no harm. Um, I did take water. So as far as my fueling is concerned, I told you about the gels, but I always wear a vest with my own electrolytes. And so I had Element electrolytes in my water bladder, in my vest. And so I would drink that at every mile. I would take a sip. And if I needed a little bit in between, then I would take a sip then. But the weather was pretty cool. So I didn't feel like I was getting overheated. Quite different than my 20-mile training run where it was 86 degrees in full sun. This was, I don't know, overcast and maybe 50s, I'm guessing. Like I said, my watch said it was 47 at the beginning, and I wouldn't have even known it. So I'm going to say it was somewhere in the 50s around that time. So it was very comfortable. I didn't feel like I was overheated. Um, I did take water though at every stop because I think it's important to add just some plain water as well. So take in electrolytes each mile, and then I would also take in a sip or two of water at each water stop whenever they would have them. And for me, that was real good balance, and that worked out really well. Otherwise, my gel of choice for this marathon was Huma, and I did have 2 Mortons as well, just to change up the flavor if I needed it. So, I did use both of them, and otherwise I would take the Huma gel. The one thing I did that I try not to do is, I meant to put the chocolate Humas in the early miles and, the fruitier ones in the later miles, and I mixed up my pockets, and so I was going through my gels and kept thinking, "Oh, the next one will be chocolate, next one will be chocolate." I mixed them up, and so I ended up having to take a chocolate gel at a very late mile. I can't remember what it was now, but a really late mile. And I love chocolate, but not at like the 20-mile mark. That's not the flavor I want at that point. So it was a tough one to get down. And I've made that mistake before and I knew it, but I just swapped my pockets. um, so the course itself is all downhill. But as you're running, most of the time, you don't feel the downhill. It just feels like you're running with a little less effort on flat ground. It doesn't seem like you're running downhill. There are times and pockets where I would feel my pace pick up and I was not putting in any extra effort, and I was starting to, like, get to the fatiguing miles, and so I knew there was a downhill, like, you could feel it then, but there was never, like, a hill that you're running down. Um, and it was what else can I say about the course? So, let me tell you a little bit about the course itself. So, out of the tunnel, you're 10 miles in. Most of the terrain and most of the course are like 2 trails, are parallel to each other. Um, The hmm, 1 second. So there are 2 trails that are running parallel to each other that are like tire tracks. And so they're just ruts in the ground, and then there's kind of a mound of dirt in between them. But there's a lot of like big gravel and rocks as well. So it's really important to try to stay in one of those tracks. And so that's where most of the runners were. They're in one of these 2 tracks. And so if you want to pass someone, you got to go into the rougher terrain to go around them. So that's most of the course. It's very dirty. It's very dusty. There were also times where the crew that were like search and rescue and the safety crew would come by on ATVs and then kick up a bunch of dust. It's just part of it, right? And they were actually picking up people, especially toward the much higher miles. There were people that they were picking up that I saw them go past me with someone in the truck with them. So, some people were getting in distress and needed help. So, um, glad that they were there to be out there to help people if they needed it. Um, the what I found was that, like I said earlier, that the people were really spread out on the course. And so there were many times during the race that I was just like on a run on my own and through this beautiful forest with, trees in this beautiful, like sloping hillside to my left, and then, sloping down to my right, and these trees that were like the tops of the trees were at my foot level, that they're huge and green everywhere, and it was just beautiful. There was actually a point though where I was really, like, really really on my own, and I'm looking around and I realized that I'm like all on my own, and I was a little nervous because I had that, hillside up to the left. I'm like, God, I hope there's no like bears up there or mountain lion who just sees a lone runner running through and thinks I'm a deer or something. So I don't know. I was a little freaked out in points because I was so alone. But I no mountain lion attacks, so I'm all good. I don't even. I'm assuming they have mountain lions around there. And I'm assuming they have bears because I saw a sign at another park that I visited the day before, and it said, "Don't feed the animals." And it had pictures of bear, mountain lion, some other creature that was like, oh, was it snakes? Maybe I don't know what it was. I mean, it's big animal. There were big animals on this sign. I'm like, hmm, I think maybe I'm not gonna like wander down there on my own. Anyway, I did find myself on my own several times, but aside from my overactive imagination, it was very beautiful and very peaceful. And I really enjoyed just being able to run through the trees, really, and know that I was running a marathon altogether. I brought with me my GoPro, and I had a little like selfie stick handle. And so I would put it in my pocket, my vest pocket, and it was just kind of wedged in there with the gels, and so that's kind of what kept it still. But I couldn't figure out what was bothering my rib, and it turns out that where this handle was in the pocket, it would sit right on my rib on the left side, and it was causing it to bruise. And I couldn't get rid of it, so I eventually had to take my GoPro out of the pocket and just hold it in my hand, and I would just kinda switch it back and forth, between my hands, for several miles, and then every once in a while, I'd put it back in the pocket and until it started to bother me, and then I'd have to take it out. So I was kind of busy, doing this and trying to stay out of pain, from something weird like a GoPro in your pocket. So that kinda comes back to practice everything and nothing new on race day. I'd never tried running with the GoPro in my pocket because I've never needed. I don't know how many gels did I have? I think I had 14 on me because I had a couple extras. Um, and no way to hold it in my pocket before. So that was new. Um, I'm better now, but it did bruise a little bit. Knees did great. My shoulder that has sometimes gets really, really tight when I run. I was able to stretch really well the day before and use a lacrosse ball, and that really helped to loosen up the muscles and get the knots out. And so I had no problem, no pain with my shoulder. So happy because sometimes on my long runs, that shoulder would really lock up and hurt. So I was really glad that I had no pain in my shoulder. Knees were great. Even with all the downhill, knees were really good. Um, there wasn't a lot of, like, spectator activity on the course just because of the terrain, you're out in the wilderness practically, and, there were some bikes that came by, like some mountain bikers, but as far as, like, course, spectator support, not much. So you're out on your own on this race. So it's not a race where you're gonna get a lot of the cheers and all of that. At certain points along the way where it was easier for people to get there, there would be people cheering and encouraging, but not like a big race. So different environment, and I think you just have to know that going in. If you really excuse me, if you really like the big crowds, that's not a big crowd race. Um, I did catch up to that 4:30 pace group though, and I was so excited because as I'm coming up on him, the guy, one of the guys running with the group, he can kind of hear me coming up behind him, and so he scoot over a little bit for me, and he said, "I heard you coming," and I said, "Yeah, I saw you. I saw you moving. Thank you so much." And then I passed him. I was so excited because I had passed the 4:30 group, and I figured I would probably be, somewhere around that time point. And so to pass them, I was a little excited, and I thought, okay, don't gonna get too excited, don't want to get ahead of myself because I still got a lot of miles to go. Um, and but I was still feeling good, so I was encouraged. And I don't remember exactly where that was, but somewhere between 14 and 20 miles, I was still feeling strong. Um, especially toward the earlier, like 14 miles, 15 miles, I was still feeling strong. I did get a little video at mile 17, and looking back on it now, because I barely remember it, but looking back on the video, I looked very alert. So I looked at the camera and I said, 17 miles, single digits to go. And from my video, I looked like I was doing well. I felt good. And my pace was consistent, so things were going well, gels were working, fluids were working. So I thought, "Oh, I've got salt tabs in my pocket." I haven't taken in any salt tabs, and I could feel, all the salt on my skin when I would reach up to kinda, like, wipe away sweat. I could feel, like, all the graininess and salt. I'm like, "I should probably take a couple of salt tabs, right now, as I get up to miles or up in these miles," because I was, like I said, it was past the 17 mark, but not quite to the 18. And, so I fish around and I get my salt tabs out, and I see the 18, mile marker right up ahead of me, and I pop them in my mouth, and I start to, suck on them, and they were kinda melty from being in my pocket. I know it's gross, but that's what we do as runners, right? And, I don't know what happened, if I breathed in or it just slid down my throat the wrong way, but I nearly died at mile 18 because I started choking on a salt tab. It went down the wrong pipe, and at first it was just like, shocking and coughing and trying to get it out, and then my throat started to close up, and I was wheezing, and I just stopped, and I was bent over, trying to just hack it out. I was starting to feel like I wanted to throw up. I'm like, maybe that's a good idea because then at least I can get rid of this. But I couldn't get my breath. So I was wheezing, like asthma wheezing, trying to get a breath. And I do not have asthma. So I'm choking on this salt tab. And this is one of those moments where I was all alone. So there were runners who had just run past me when I first started coughing, and they probably would have even known anything was wrong. And so they ran ahead and they were far ahead. And in the middle of this attack, I look behind me to see how far away help might be. And they were like way back there. So they wouldn't be up to me for a long time, and I couldn't breathe. And finally, it just kinda started to let up, and I started to be able to breathe, and, thank God. I was just so grateful. By the way, I'm CPR certified, so every race I go to, I always bring a little, travel face mask protector, in case someone needs, CPR on the course. I've got a little protector mask for myself, to be able to give CPR. And so I had it in my zipper pocket in my back of my shorts, and as I was, like, not being able to breathe, I'm thinking, "I bring that little thing every single time I go to a race, and I've never had to use it, and now someone's gonna have to use it on me." I was really upset, and I also couldn't figure out how I was gonna get it out of my zipper pocket to give it to someone so that, like, if I die or if I pass out, please use this. So, thankfully, it did not come to that, and I was able to start breathing again, and around the time that I was just finally catching my breath, but I was still standing still, another woman came by and she said, "Hey, are you okay? Do you need help?" And I said, I choked on a salt tab, and I didn't have a voice, my throat was so burning and scratching still, and she's like, "Oh my god, that's the worst." So, apparently it's a thing, and it happens to the best of us. So, um, anyway, she said, "Are you sure you're okay?" I'm like, "Yeah, I wasn't 30 seconds ago, but I'm good now, so thank you." And so she took off, and then I was able to keep running. So I just started running again. And my throat definitely burned and scratched because of all that coughing and also just the irritation from the salt, that burned my throat, when that happened. It was really uncomfortable, but it I mean, I was able to finish, so I was able to just keep going. Um, so the last 10K after that were different kind of pain. So that was my nearly death moment, at mile 18. But at the 20-mile mark, I still had an hour to go. I still had an hour of running based on my pacing. And about mile 21, I'd say, my quads started to feel the cumulative effect of the downhill, and they were hurting. I mean, they were really starting to burn and really starting to hurt. And I still had so many miles to go. Um, I was running behind these 2 girls. They were, clearly younger than me, and, they seemed so fit, and, they just seemed like to me, from my perspective, it seemed like they were just running effortlessly. But it was funny because we kept kinda jockeying back and forth, so, like, sometimes they'd be in front, and then sometimes I'd get in front, and we'd kinda go back and forth a little bit, and, uh and then at the end, I ran into them, and it was funny because I congratulated them on their run, and, she's like, "Oh my gosh, you're so fast, you look so strong," and I'm like, "I thought the same thing about you." I said, "Thanks for pacing me," and she's like, "Oh, no, you paced us, or we paced off of you." So it was so funny that we had that sort of energetic connection on the course, and we didn't even know it. So I was really glad that I stopped and said, congratulations to them because I never would have known that otherwise. So that was really neat experience also. Um, so somewhere around mile 23, 23, 24, somewhere in there, I did a body scan. Like, okay, I'm in pain, right? But am I dying? That's sort of like my body check. Like, okay, am I dying or am I just in pain? So my breathing was good, heart rate was good, and legs were burning and very sore. Mostly it was just the quadriceps. Really, it was all focused in the front of the leg, front of the thigh. If you're not sure where the quadriceps are, it's just above the knee and below the hip in the front, and that was what was burning. So I'm like, okay, well, that's painful. But they've been painful for about 3 miles now. So what's another couple miles to go, right? It's just pain. So that's kind of how I got through it. Was I just sort of set my mindset, said, okay, I'm not dying. I can run cardiovascularly. I'm doing well. my legs hurt a lot, but it's to be expected. So therefore, this becomes a mental effort. It is no longer a physical effort. Now it's mental, it's mind over body. And so that's where I focused. So my focus was simply to keep myself positive and to keep myself moving at every, with everything I had. And so that was where my mindset was in those last 3 miles, especially I say the last 5 miles were the hardest, but definitely in those last three. Uh, I just sort of set my mind or I set my body on autopilot, and I just let my mind just kind of try to forget about the pain in my body. I just ran, and it's like I wasn't even controlling my body, and my legs were just moving at that point, just moving, and I just went with them. And as I neared the finish line, as I got closer and closer, there were definitely many more people starting to walk. And that could be a mental game as well, because you start to see people around you doing it. And part of your mind says, oh, well, they're walking. Why can't you? You'd be so much more comfortable if you would just walk. But I didn't need to walk. It was just painful, right? It was just soreness in my body. So I'm like, nope. I had to talk to my brain at that point, and I said, no, no, no. I have not come this far uh, to walk it in and to start walking at this point when I don't have an injury. If I can run, I'm running. So maybe they have an injury. Maybe that's why they're walking. So this is not their. I'm not running their race. I'm running my race. And so I convinced myself to keep running, and that's how I did it. I just said, nope, nope, nope. I did not come this far to start walking at the end. Um, so right around that mile 26 mark, had point 2 to go, and there was a woman and a couple of like teenage girls standing near the mile marker. And then one of the teenagers yells out, she says, "You're almost there, just around the corner, and then straight on to the finish." And I mean, normally when someone says you're almost there, you're like not almost there. But in this case, she gave me directions. So I'm like, okay, I can follow those directions. I am almost there. I see the 26. She's telling me how to get there because you did kind of have to turn a corner a little bit. And so you couldn't see the finish line at this point. And so she wouldn't have said that. I wouldn't have really had an idea of what the next quarter mile-ish looks like. So with that in mind, it really kind of sparked me and woke me up a bit. And then no matter how much pain my quads were in, it's like, I can do it. So also, I don't think if I would have stopped to walk, I would have been able to start running again. My quads probably would have just locked up entirely at that point. The only way I could keep going at that point was that I was already running. And so I just had to keep running in order to maintain it. And so that's what I did. I just kept running. And it was very awesome. When the finish line came into sight, then there was more people and they were cheering you on toward the finish. And for the first time ever since running a race, I heard the announcer call out my name. So he calls out my name, he says, "From San Diego." And I didn't hear much else after that, but I did hear that. And then I crossed the finish, and I was so happy and so excited and exhausted. I did not cry. I never cry at the finish line. And it's not because I'm not emotional about it. I am. I'm just too exhausted. I don't think I have enough salt and water left in my body to produce tears at that point. So um, I was just ex- relieved, I think. It was my first emotion, relieved to be done, and also in a little bit of disbelief. Like, I did it. Oh my god. Oh my god, I did it. I think I remember thinking the same thing when I had my son, like, "Oh my god, I can't believe I did that." So, You are stronger than you think you are, and you can surprise yourself in some very amazing situations. And one of which is running a marathon when you weren't 100% sure, 4 months ago, if you would make it. Because that's where I was when I didn't even sign up for this race until the uh, registrations started like disappearing. And then I got nervous. And so I signed up at that point. But um, I didn't want to lose out after all that training, and not get my place on the course. So anyway, it was a surreal moment, I think is the best way to describe it. And then I just kind of walked around in a fog, and I have like butterfingers whenever I'm at the end of a race like that where I'm so tired and I kept dropping things. So I have my water and then I drop it. I'm like, oh my God, so far down. So I would, you know, somehow get down and pick it up. It was really hard. My quads. This is what am I? I'm 3 days out from the marathon now, and today was the very first day that I could kind of function with my quads being the way they are, and I could foam roll and get a little relief from that and help them kind of loosen up a little. But whew, I would not touch my quads with a foam roller or anything before today. So, but I'm already starting to recover, and I think by tomorrow I'll be fine. So, not too bad. I mean, it was pretty painful, but recovery has been quick. My brain though was just absolutely done. I couldn't even figure out how to get my drop bag open because I had zip tied it. And this really nice volunteer, she was so sweet. I said, "Do you have any scissors? I have to cut the zip tie off my bag so I can, get it open." And I didn't tell her because wanted to get it open. I just said I need to cut the zip tie off. And she goes, "Oh yeah, I've got scissors." And she goes, "Oh, I can't find them." She goes, I'm like, "Oh shoot." And kind of like looking at it. And she goes, "What are you trying to do?" I said, "I just need to get it open." She goes, "You just need to open the bag?" I'm like, "Yeah." And so she takes my bag and she like, I don't know, loosens it a little bit and just opens it up. Like, oh my God. It would have opened the whole time. So I'm like, I feel so stupid. And she laughs. She goes, "You have runner brain, honey. It's fine." So thank goodness for those lovely volunteers who understand runner's brain. So anyway, I needed to quickly replenish my glucose so that I could think again and drive the 40 minutes back because otherwise I would be danger on the road. So I had some chips, and I had a couple bottles of water, I think I grabbed a banana, just some snacks just to kind of get some, food in me again. And that was really nice. So after that, I walked over to the bus, got right on. Well, it has like 4 steps up, but thankfully they have like good railings. So pulled myself up the steps of the bus and sat down next to a younger man who probably in his 30s, I think, who had just run his first marathon. And he was a very speedy runner. He was like what was he, 3:17 for his first marathon. And so he was, nice guy sharing about. I guess he was kind of local to that. And then there's another gentleman over to the other side of me who said he was 52 and just ran the marathon as well. And you know, again, just everybody was just so chattery and excited. Even after running the marathon, they were all just like hyped up on a lot of adrenaline and energy. So it was kind of cool. It was a neat environment at the end. Drove back to the main parking lot where I did not park. And so just did the couple-minute walk back to the parking lot where all of us seem to have been in the big dirt lot. And that was easy. And so then I was able to drive the 40 minutes back. I was a little worried about sitting and, concerned that I might cramp up or something, but I didn't. It was great. So anyway, my that was my race experience. And so my overall thoughts on the race, just to kind of sum it up or to give sort of my highlights, was number one, my overall grade is that I loved it. I really enjoyed just the whole experience. Like I said, the tunnel wasn't my favorite, but that's okay. It didn't detract from it either. It's pretty quick in the beginning. It just wasn't my favorite. That's all. Very well organized, nice volunteers, as I said, that understand runner's brain at the end. Um, it's really no frills. You don't have all the spectators and stuff, but the course is just beautiful, just absolutely beautiful. Um, Downsides, dirt trail, because of all the rocks and the pivots and things. I don't know how people Boston qualify on that course with all the, rocks and stuff. I mean, it's downhill, it's flat, but I mean, it's not like a road where you're really sure-footed. So I'm surprised people can run as fast as they do on that course. I mean, I was doing okay with my pacing. I was definitely able to keep my planned marathon pace for most of it, even a little faster. But I mean, it wasn't like running on a road. It's a little different. But you just use road shoes. You don't have to have trail shoes or anything like that. Um, if you have a little cushier shoe, might be good. By the way, don't wear white shoes unless you just don't care about those shoes anymore, because you will be filthy, absolutely filthy. My shoes were black and they were like so dirty you couldn't even tell they were black shoes at the end, and my legs were all dirty. So it's just very dusty, and so you're going to get dirty. Don't wear shoes that you don't want to get basically ruined with dirt. Um, anyway, lots of turned ankles and stuff. By the way, I saw a woman on Instagram who had posted up her finish for the race, and she was holding an X-ray in her hand. And apparently, she broke her foot at mile 4, and she still finished the race. I don't know. As a coach, I don't recommend that. As a coach, I say take care of yourself. She was going for a BQ time. She didn't get her BQ time, but she did finish. Um, I just can't even imagine how you finish a marathon, for 22 miles on a broken foot. But she did. So hopefully she'll come back stronger than ever and get her BQ time next year. Some takeaways and some tips for downhill running. Number one, strengthen your quads more than you think you need to. I had worked on my quads, but not quite as much as I really should have, probably. Um, I thought I had pretty strong quads, and so I didn't think that I had to do, lots and lots of extra. I think it would have been more comfortable in those higher miles. When I got to that mile 21 and I started to really burn, I think it would have made for a more comfortable end of the race if I had done a little bit more quad work with strength training prior to. So up your quad exercises a little more than you think you need, even if you already have strong quads. It's definitely still a good idea. Also, make sure you have very good ankle mobility and strength. So, again, I always encourage people to use the mobile board, because that is going to help with both proprioception and strengthening of the ankle, the knee, the hip, the whole kinetic chain. And you're going to need that strength to avoid any turned ankles. If you do step wrong, then if you have been strengthening properly up until that point, then you have a better chance of coming out of it without an injury if you do kind of step wrong. So definitely work on that ankle strength and mobility. Also, strengthen your core and low back for that stability too. And plyometrics. Make sure that you are incorporating plyometrics in your strength training once a week, twice a week. Again, because you're going to want the lateral movement. So you want to strengthen the outer hips with your plyometrics, and maybe some multi-directional pogo hops, because there are times when you're running along on one of those tracks or ruts, and then you're going to need to go around someone, and you're going to have to move to the side, and you have to kind of run on the more rough terrain, and then you're going to have to move back. So you want to make sure that you're able to move side to side and lateral without turning an ankle or stepping wrong or something. And you got to be able to account for that uneven terrain that you're going to have to step through to go around someone. So lateral hip strength also is really important. You want to protect that IT band. I know someone who was doing the half marathon who injured I don't know if she injured, but definitely had, well, she had to stop. So I'm going to call that an injury of her IT band while she was doing the half marathon. So you want to make sure that you're really supporting that IT band. And that's really it. I mean, otherwise, follow your training. If you need a training plan, you know I'm Coach Val, so you could reach out to me if you need a training plan. I'm happy to put one together for you with strength and a training plan for your racing. Whatever it is you need, of course, we'll have a chat and put something together that would be best suited for you and where you are in your own fitness level and for the race that you want to run. But otherwise, if you enjoyed this episode, please share it with someone. If you know someone who wants to do a downhill race or do this race in particular, the Jack and Jill downhill marathon, then please share the episode with them. And hopefully it will help them get prepared and to kind of know what to expect. Sometimes just having an idea of what to expect is enough to help prepare you mentally to take on that challenge and to know, how you should maybe structure your day and just not feeling like you're just kind of winging it is very helpful. So at least I find that very helpful. I watched a number of YouTube videos myself before this race, and I found the information so helpful. So hopefully you find this helpful as well as you plan. Also, if you want to connect with me further, please jump over to Instagram. I'm running.on.carbs, and I love to connect with you there. So please join me on Instagram. And in the meantime, I hope you have a fantastic rest of your day. And don't forget, run your best life on carbs. I'm Coach Val, and I will see you next time. Take care.